about when you decided that you were going to be active, going back to early December. Did you are you sort of where you thought you might be based on the moves in total that you made?
It's a good question. I think I'd characterize, this trade deadline. We did our heavy lifting about a month ago, and so I feel like this trade deadline, we cleaned up a lot of things, and we, addressed some of the things we talked about after the OG and Pascal trades. We were able to turn one of the picks into a good young player in Ochai, and it's kind of a steady in presence in Kelly. Financially, we were able to, gain some more flexibility this summer with the Dennis trade. But yeah, I think the heavy lifting was done this, December, January, and this kind of like deadline continued on kind of that path. If that makes sense.
There wasn't great speculation about Bruce's future. Was there as much interest as we would like to believe, and why were you unable to come up with anything like?
Yeah, I think it's fair. Had we gotten the offers we wanted for Bruce, if kind of hit our threshold, we would have done something. At the same time, I think Bruce is 27. He has a really interesting contract. He provides a professionalism and toughness I think we're all seeing on the court, so we value that. And there's options with Bruce this summer. I also think if you look around the league today, there weren't a ton of major moves. And so I think that, maybe some larger macro elements in the NBA are contributing to, teams going forward and making big deals. But no, we're happy with Bruce. We're happy to continue on with him.
You mentioned getting the heavy lifting done early. What, I guess, was the thinking behind making those moves as early as you guys did, as opposed to taking it up closer to the deadline for Pascal and OG? And in the end, was it beneficial, I guess, to have this time the last few weeks to gauge the market on some of the other guys after doing the heavy lifting early?
Yeah, so a couple parts there. I think, to be honest, the start of the season didn't kind of, get off how we wanted to. And so I think we were, in some ways forced to address, those two situations. I also think the value for those players, a lot of the conversations we had around those two players were the teams wanted to acquire them as early as possible, so they had a longer, runway for the rest of the season. So I think a couple of factors contributed to those deals happening early. I think it lessened the load, right, of, imagine trying to do all those deals this week. That wasn't necessarily the intention of it, but it did give us a stretch. We've had some injuries and whatnot, but at least we've had a little bit of time, or more time than normal. Had we done those deals at the trade deadline, we'd be looking at, 25 to 30 games with that group, whereas now we're going to have, hopefully 45 to 50 looking at that young group. So doing it early, I think, was advantageous for us, was advantageous for the teams that have acquired them, and allows us to approach this deadline understanding who the core of this team is.
This is the third straight year you acquired a pending free agent, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, with, somewhat of an intention of keeping him around for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously that comes with bird rights. It's not something you see a ton around the league, so why do you guys like this?
Well, I think, you could probably even date back to the Surge trade, right? I mean, I think it allows you to, bring that person in-house, get a feel for them, understand how they fit with your culture, how they fit basketball-wise, and then make that decision in the summer from a bit more of an informed point of view. So I think that's just generally the thinking behind it. I guess specifically you're asking with respect to Kelly? Yeah, so I think Kelly, listen, everyone in here has followed him for a long time. We've been big fans of Kelly. I think the way we view him specifically is, he's kind of like a steady hand, and I think we've seen it with the bench units, especially with the bigs. He's going to provide a skill set, a veteran presence, a voice that, we think that unit could, use some help with. And so we're excited to have Kelly. The conversations have been great. I think he really wants to be here. He's excited for this opportunity. I think from a contract perspective, he is extension eligible right now, so it's a little different than some of the other players. So you can have those conversations and, have an understanding of what he's looking for.
How do you think the new CBA played a part, or how did you feel it playing a part in this trade deadline?
It's probably a bit too much CBA minutia, but I think you had a number of large factors kind of contributing to a restricted market. So you had a lot of the contending teams just didn't have a ton of assets. So the teams that you would normally would be buyers just were kind of capped out or, didn't have the draft picks. I think everyone is a little unsure about the pending financial penalties under the new system. And so I think that contributed to, the sellers maybe being less inclined to take on money that they otherwise would have been, and then the typical buyers just not kind of having the ammo to come out and get guys.
You mentioned that now you guys have a pretty good idea of the core that you're building around. Is Gary part of that group? I mean, he's in that same age bracket or a similar age bracket with those guys, but of course he's going to be a free agent. Where do you kind of see him in his future with this team?
Yeah, so I think on the surface, Gary's 25 years old and a 40% three-point shooter, right? So you'd start there. I think he probably would even admit he didn't get off to as good of a start as he would have wanted to, but he's kind of settled in now and we're seeing it. So I think it's a little TBD on Gary, but I think we're watching him grow with this group. We're watching him, pick and choose his spots offensively. I think you're seeing him be a bit more aggressive defensively, which we've seen over the years. So I think it's a great stretch for him, and it's a great stretch for us to evaluate him.
The decision to waive Spencer, for whatever reason, but you freed up roster spots. You expect to fill them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, part of the Spencer decision making was just age. We want to play young guys. We want to take looks at, we've seen some Scotty at point guard. We'll, hopefully see more there. But it also does free up 2 roster spots for us to bring in some guys, take shots on, some free agents, scour the G League, overseas. So we'll definitely use those 2 roster spots.
You mentioned wanting to go after young players, just to add. One of the guys you added was 32-year-old Kelly. And you had, there are other older players on this team. Why didn't you guys go all young, for example?
I think we were trying to find the right mix. We've, and even in personal conversations with a lot of teams in our similar position, the young guys need leadership, right? And I think we lost a bit of that in veteran presence when we made our earlier deals. And so you're trying to find that right chemistry of who can kind of guide these players. It's tough for us to lose Thad. I think everybody's seen how important he was, and, he had to be included in that deal. So are we simultaneously bringing in young players to develop and grow, but also creating an environment around them where they're learning professional habits, they're being held accountable, they're understanding how to play basketball at the NBA level, they're learning how to win. So that's the mix that we're always trying to shoot for.
You've brought in 2 Canadians, in RJ and Kelly, in these deals. Is their nationality bringing 2 hometown guys play a role, or is it just strictly basketball decisions?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the basketball piece. I think, we're biased and we've watched them grow up more, so maybe we're more familiar with their game, right? If there's ever, I always tell people, if there's ever a young Canadian kid up, like, it's our job to know them in and out and make sure that, we have a good feel on them. And so from both of those point of views, we love them as players first. And it's great that they are Canadian, they want to be here. And so I think that'd be the other piece, which is having players that want to play here, goes a long way on many levels.
Ochai was obviously highly touted coming off that Final Four, and then part of the Donovan Mitchell trade as well. I mean, what do you guys see in him that made him sort of a guy to pursue?
Yeah, hardworking, high character, 2-way player. Kind of fits the bill of guys we've pursued over the years. 4-year player at Kansas, so you got to watch his development. I think he ended his run as maybe most outstanding player of the tournament that year. Has started at times in Utah, so we feel like we're getting a young player with a lot of upside, hard worker, high character, and so we'll bet on those.
The team that Darko got, obviously, when he was hired, is quite different than the team he has now. How do you feel he's reacted to sort of all the changes over the past few months and sort of going forward?
Darko's great, and I think part of the interview process, you go through all those scenarios, right? We know the team that we were going to put forth, but we also knew the potential changes that could happen. So that we're very upfront, we're communicative. He's been part of a lot of different NBA franchises, so I don't think this feels entirely new to him. But a lot of it's just day-to-day or even hourly conversations about the direction of the team, and so it's been something we've been discussing internally with him for a while now, and especially after the two major moves before, he kind of saw this was the direction that everything was going.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago about veterans teaching them how to be pros and building a culture of winning. You haven't had a lot of wins. You're 3-13. How does this sort of foster that part of the development? These traits, like, how does it make your team win more?
Right. I think Ochai, he will develop in a competitive environment. I think he'll develop with guys his age group. So I think that is, one of our big focuses is getting guys in that sort of 22, 28 kind of age group. I think Kelly helped solidify that as a presence off the bench. We've seen that, especially in the front court off the bench, that we've had some, trouble rebounding or whatever you may say. So yeah, I think it solidifies in the sense that we're going to keep competing, and there'll be a structure in place that will allow us to be competitive in all the games.
And sort of on that note, Bobby, you get a player in Scotty who's an all-star now and clearly is on the rise, and so how much focus is on making sure he's surrounded with players that he can go and compete with versus how did you get a player like Scotty, right? Like he's a top tier draft pick. So how do you kind of balance building a team that remains sort of competitive around it, but still, you need star power in this league?
Yeah, I think that's just the process that we're all probably, going through now. And so how long do you give it? We made some moves now. The summer, this is probably a multi-year process. And so I think from the point of view of building around Scotty, you want young players in his age group that I think culturally, socially, energy-wise, I think you want to put skill sets around him. And so I think we'll be interested to see a Kelly skill set. I don't know if he's had a player like Kelly to play with. And then you want guys who just want to be here, want to run. I think Ochai's energy will invigorate Scotty. So you're trying to hit on all those points, sort of age, culture, social, skill set, and that's what we'll continue to do.
And I guess with the pick that's out to San Antonio, is there any emphasis on, you're pretty close to maybe keeping it this year, or I guess the word, how important is for you to get a top 6 pick either this year or next year?
I think we're going to prioritize seeing this group play. If it ends up that we're in the top 6, sure, if we're out of the top 6, but I don't think that, especially the way that the new NBA rules are, to try and game that doesn't make a ton of sense, right? At the end of the day, it's going to be the lottery balls. So I don't think there's a ton of let's do this or that, but I think the big priority for us is playing that young group together, getting Grady in there with that group, seeing how they fit together, because that will give us a lot more information about how to build the team, what moves to make this summer, as opposed to what's going to happen over the next, 20, 25 games.
You guys are, and Sai talks about rebuilding as a term he used last time here. You don't see a ton of teams in that sort of position giving up a first round pick. You guys obviously had a couple, but why did you feel comfortable giving up an asset like that, a future asset, in a trade today?
I think we said, we had 3, maybe even 4 first round picks if you include the Detroit pick. And so to a lot of the sort of other things we've been talking about, it's hard to bring in that many kids into an environment, grow them, in the right way. I think you're seeing it with Grady, which is there's a ton of resources, staff, programs in place, but there's a lot that you need to do to raise them. And so I think, the thought of 3 or 4 of them felt like, hey, if we can cash in one now for someone like Ochai, who's still young but early in his career, then you kind of solidified one of those. And so I don't think we view it as using a pick that we otherwise would have wanted in the draft. We kind of use it to get the type of player we would want to have gotten in the draft.
Just following up on that, is it safe to say that maybe we're offers for other picks in this draft, and it's the same reason you don't want to have too many of that?
I think the value with the picks, so if we had the Indy pick, we potentially have our own, but that's going to San Antonio, the 31. Yeah, so there's different tiers, right? And so you could, come up with all the scenarios. You use 2 picks on this player, to use 1 pick on this player, to use all 3 picks on somebody. And so, I guess that's the game we're playing. And so we decided ultimately that the 1 pick for Ochai and Kelly made sense.
Where does Chris Boucher fit? And he kind of looks like he slipped out of the rotation, and he's been here for a while. He's got that extra year on his deal. Was there much interest or movement around him? How do you project the next kind of couple of months going forward?
I think Chris is the longest standing Raptor now. So, we have good relationship with Chris. We have good communication. I think he's obviously going through a tough time, but he's been professional. He's been good energy. We talk to him often. So, I think we traded 8 players so far. And so, sounds like some people would rather trade 15, but, we got a lot of work done. And so there's more moves to be done. But with Chris, I'm sure he'll bounce back like he always does. He didn't get to this place in the NBA if he wasn't resilient. And it seems like every time he's out, he's back in. But we're not too concerned with Chris.
With the Dennis trade, you guys created some flexibility, it seems like, for the summer. This isn't an organization that brings in top-tier free agents very often. What do you see as the value of that flexibility, of that money?
It's not necessarily obviously to use cap space. I think you can. I think the Bruce contract's another one where you can kind of open up a ton if you want. So more was just the optionality of going into this summer with reduced committeds. And so you just have more options available to you. So I don't think there was anything specifically in mind, like, hey, we're doing this or we're doing that, as opposed to let's, see what our books look like with, 13 million or so off the books.
So I said last summer, in the offseason, how we didn't really enjoy watching the team play a year ago. What's it been like to watch the team play this year? Obviously, it hasn't been a winning season. Just from a front office standpoint, has the attitude, or has that shifted at all?
I think where we are now, yeah, it's young, exciting. I think we're all watching new players, so there's probably just, different parts of your brain going off as you watch Quickly come off a pick and roll, or you watch RJ, slash through the lane, or you watch, Scotty interact with them. And so, watching Jordan Nwora come and have those games. So I think it's more fun. There's a different energy around the team. So I think we're enjoying, this part of the process with the younger team as they grow and develop.
Thanks for watching the Toronto Raptors YouTube channel. Check out our latest video and subscribe for more.